I want you to imagine a very common scene. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. You are lying awake staring at the ceiling, and your mind is not calm. It is running through all the things that could go wrong tomorrow. The car could break down, the laptop you need for work could die, your job could disappear, a medical bill could arrive, a family emergency could hit, a pet could need surgery. None of these events is extraordinary. They are ordinary shocks. They are the normal weather of life. But when you have no financial buffer, ordinary shocks feel like existential threats. That is what most people misunderstand about money. They think money is only about buying things. It is not. At the most basic level, money is about reducing fragility. Money creates space between an event and your reaction to that event. When you have no space, you are forced to react. And when you are forced to react, you usually make lower quality decisions. That is why one of the most important financial milestones is not $1 million. It is not $100,000. It is the first $10,000. $10,000 does not make a person rich. It does not mean financial freedom. It does not mean you can stop working, stop planning, or stop being careful. But it changes the operating system. It changes how you think, how you sleep, how you evaluate risk, how you make decisions, and how you behave when life applies pressure. In my own way of thinking, this is a shift from survival mode to optionality mode. That shift is subtle, but it is extremely powerful. Before we talk about why $10,000 matters, we have to look clearly at what life looks like without it. When you are living paycheck to paycheck, money is not just money. Money becomes mental noise. You walk into a grocery store and calculate everything. Can I buy the better cereal, or do I need the cheapest one? Can I say yes when a friend asks me to dinner, or do I need to create an excuse? Because a $25 meal will disturb the entire week. Can I pay this bill now, or should I delay it? Can I fill the gas tank all the way, or should I put in just enough to get through a few days? This is not merely inconvenience. It is a constant decision burden. Every small expense becomes a negotiation with fear. Every financial choice becomes a defensive calculation. You are not designing your life. You are defending against collapse. That has consequences. It consumes attention. It consumes patience. It consumes confidence. And because attention is limited, the more attention you spend on basic financial survival, the less you have available for improving your life. People often think that financial stress is only about numbers, but financial stress changes behavior. It makes people more reactive, more short-term, more fearful, and less strategic. That is why the first $10,000 can matter so much, not because it allows you to spend more, because it allows you to panic less. The first major change is your relationship with risk. When you have no savings, every decision feels dangerous. A new job is dangerous. Moving to a different city is dangerous. Taking a course is dangerous. Starting a side project is dangerous. Even taking a short break can feel dangerous, because one wrong move could create a chain reaction you cannot absorb. But when you have $10,000 sitting behind you, the same decisions feel different. You do not become reckless. You become less fragile. That is an important distinction. A financial buffer does not tell you to take stupid risks. It gives you the ability to take intelligent risks. It may give you the confidence to ask for a promotion. It may give you the ability to leave a toxic job without immediately taking the first bad offer. It may let you pay for training that raises your earning power. It may allow you to move to a place with better opportunity. It may give you enough space to say no to a bad deal. That is what optionality means. You are not rich, but you have more choices. Most people underestimate the value of choices. They focus on income. Income matters. But when every dollar of income is already committed before it arrives, income alone does not produce freedom. The person may earn a lot and still feel trapped. A person with $10,000 saved may have less income than someone else, but more control. Control is one of the most undervalued financial assets. The second thing that changes is the body's response to stress. This is not just philosophy. Financial insecurity affects the nervous system. When a person is constantly afraid of a bill, a broken car, a job loss, or a medical expense, the body stays on alert, stress hormones rise, sleep suffers, patience declines, decision quality falls. The same event can feel completely different depending on whether you have a buffer. If your car's check engine light comes on and you have no savings, that light can feel like a threat to your entire life. Your mind immediately starts building the disaster chain. How much will this cost? Will I have to put it on a credit card? Can I get to work? Will I miss shifts? Will I lose income? Can I borrow from someone? The car problem is not just a car problem. It becomes a financial crisis, a work crisis, a family crisis, and a psychological crisis. Now imagine the same light comes on when you have $10,000 saved. You are still annoyed. You still do not want to pay for the repair. But you are not in panic. You can take the car to a mechanic. You can get an estimate. You can make a decision. The same event moved from catastrophe to inconvenience. That difference may sound small, but it ripples through everything. When you are not panicked, you negotiate better. You think better. You sleep better. You communicate better. You do not bring as much fear into your relationships. You do not carry as much tension into work. You are less likely to make desperate financial decisions that create bigger problems later. This is why the value of an emergency fund is not only in spending it. In many cases, the greatest value is knowing it exists. That is the emergency fund effect. Most people who build their first $10,000 do not immediately spend it on emergencies. The money often sits there, and because it sits there, it changes the person. It changes the quality of their thinking. It changes the probability of their decisions. It changes their behavior under stress. That is a much bigger effect than people realize. A good cash buffer is like insurance against bad decisions. It is not only insurance against bills, it is insurance against fear. The third change is confidence. When you know you have money in the bank, you carry yourself differently. It means you are less desperate. Desperation is expensive. It makes people accept bad jobs, bad contracts, bad clients, bad loans, bad terms, and bad relationships with money. When you have no savings, you are often negotiating from weakness. You may need the job too badly. You may need the client too badly. You may need the landlord to be patient. You may need the lender to approve you. Need reduces leverage. A $10,000 buffer does not give you infinite leverage, but it gives you some. And some leverage is enough to change outcomes. A person with savings can say, I do not have to take this exact offer today. A person with savings can wait an extra month for a better job. A person with savings can pay for a certification or a license or a move if the expected return is good. A person with savings can leave a bad arrangement before it becomes destructive. That confidence can produce real economic gains, not because money magically creates ability, but because it reduces fear enough for ability to be used. This is one of the main principles I have learned from studying cycles and decision. Making the environment affects behavior, and behavior affects outcomes. Financial security is an environment. If your internal environment is constant fear, your decisions will reflect fear. If your internal environment has a little stability, your decisions become more strategic. That is how small buffers create large long-term effects. Now, a person might say $10,000 sounds impossible. I understand that. If someone is currently struggling to save even $100 per month, $10,000 can feel like a number from another world. But the hardest part is usually not only the math, the hardest part is identity. Most people treat saving like a short-term diet. They cut spending sharply for a few weeks or a few months. They feel deprived. They get tired. Then they go back to old patterns. That approach usually fails because it depends on constant willpower. Willpower is not a system. Identity is more powerful. The person who succeeds at saving $10,000 begins to think, I am the kind of person who keeps money. That identity matters. When you become the kind of person who saves, you start seeing opportunities to save that you did not notice before. You start noticing subscriptions. You start noticing spending patterns. You start noticing how often convenience purchases quietly drain your account. You start thinking differently about raises, bonuses, tax refunds, side income, and overtime. The same money flows through the same life, but the person is different. And when the person is different, the result becomes different. The first $1,000 is often the hardest. It requires the most friction. It requires changing habits before there is much visible reward. The second 1,000 is usually easier. By the fifth or 6,000, the system begins to feel normal. The person has built the habit. The person has learned that money can stay. That is a psychological breakthrough. For many people, money feels like something that arrives and disappears. Paycheck comes in, bills go out, purchases happen, and the account returns to zero. It becomes normal to have no surplus. Saving the first 10,000 breaks that pattern. It proves that money can accumulate. It proves that the person is not destined to live at zero. That proof is very powerful. There is also a practical mathematical reason $10,000 matters. It covers many of the emergencies that push people into destructive debt. A car repair may be $500, $2,000, or $3,000. An urgent medical bill may fall in that range. A move may cost several $1,000s. A period of job loss may require a few months of basic expenses. A family emergency may require travel or temporary support. $10,000 does not solve every possible disaster. It will not cover everything. It will not protect against every long-term illness, every major lawsuit, every collapse, every housing crisis. But it covers the majority of ordinary shocks. And ordinary shocks are what keep many people trapped. They are not ruined by one dramatic event. They are drained by repeated small emergencies that force them into credit cards, payday loans, missed payments, fees, and bad decisions. The first 10,000 creates a wall against that cycle. Once the wall exists, the person can start thinking beyond defense. That is the next transformation. Before savings, money is mainly about survival. After a buffer exists, money becomes a tool for options. This is when people begin to understand investing not as gambling, but as the next layer of the system. They begin to ask, should I put money into a retirement account? Should I increase my earning power? Should I start a side business? Should I learn about the market? Should I use part of future surplus to build long-term assets? That thought process becomes possible because the mind is no longer fully occupied by survival. This is why a person with $10,000 saved may be closer to financial independence than a person with no savings who earns much more. That statement may sound strange, but it is true in an important sense. The higher earner with no savings has not yet learned how to keep money. And keeping money is the foundation of building wealth. There are people who earn six figures and remain constantly broke. Their income rises, but their spending rises with it. They have impressive cars, expensive apartments, nice restaurants, new devices, but no resilience. There are also people who earn modest incomes and quietly build savings because their behavior is aligned with their goal. The difference is not just income. It is system, identity, and discipline. Earning matters. But if every increase in income becomes an increase in consumption, wealth does not accumulate. Saving $10,000 is a practical education in separating wants from needs. It teaches patience, it teaches restraint, it teaches awareness, it teaches that a dollar can either disappear or become part of a base that makes the next decision easier. That is a very important lesson. It is one of the earliest forms of financial maturity. Now, let us make this concrete. What can $10,000 actually do? It can handle most car problems. Not all of them, but most. It can cover many urgent medical costs. Not all medical risks, but many of the common ones. It can give you 3 to 6 months of breathing room if your expenses are controlled. It can give you time to find a job that fits rather than immediately accepting the first option out of fear. It can fund a certification that raises your income. It can cover the cost of moving to a stronger opportunity. It can help you say no, and saying no is one of the most valuable things money can buy. A person without savings often cannot say no. No to a bad boss, no to a bad landlord, no to a bad loan, no to a bad client, no to a bad deal. When you cannot say no, you are not free. $10,000 does not make you fully free, but it begins to restore your ability to say no in small but meaningful ways. That is the beginning of power. The psychological benefits continue. People with emergency savings often sleep better. This is intuitive, but it is also important. Sleep affects everything. When sleep deteriorates, health deteriorates, work performance deteriorates, relationships deteriorate, decision-making deteriorates. Financial stress is one of the great destroyers of sleep. Remove some of that stress, and you do not just improve finances. You improve the person who is making financial decisions. Relationships can improve too. Money stress is one of the major sources of conflict in families and marriages. When every bill feels like a threat, people become irritable. They become defensive. They become ashamed. They become resentful. They avoid conversations, or they turn every conversation into a fight. A buffer does not solve all relationship problems, but it lowers the background pressure. It gives people more emotional capacity. It makes it easier to be present. It reduces the number of times a small purchase or a surprise bill becomes an argument that matters. Money is not only an individual system, it is a social system. The way you feel about money changes how you interact with other people. When you have no savings, you may avoid social situations because you cannot afford them. You may feel embarrassed. You may withdraw. You may resent people who appear more stable. You may say no so often that people stop inviting you. And over time, financial insecurity becomes social isolation. A savings buffer does not mean you say yes to everything. In fact, disciplined people still say no often. But the reason changes. You are no longer saying no only because you are trapped. You are saying no because you are choosing. Choice feels different from constraint. That difference affects the human spirit. Another hidden benefit is the reduction of decision fatigue every day. A person without savings makes dozens of small survival calculations. Can I afford this? Should I delay that? What if this bill clears before that paycheck arrives? Should I buy the cheaper item even if it is lower quality? Should I drive less this week? Should I avoid the doctor because I do not know what it will cost? Each decision may seem small, but together they burn mental energy. By the end of the day, the person is exhausted not only from work, but from constant calculation. When a person has 10,000, many of those calculations become less intense. You still make thoughtful decisions, you still care about spending, but you are not making every decision from survival fear. At the grocery store, you may choose the item you actually prefer rather than the item that produces the least immediate anxiety. That sounds small, but it can feel like freedom to someone who has spent years calculating every dollar. Freedom often begins in small places. The ability to buy groceries without panic, the ability to repair a car without shame, the ability to take a job interview without desperation, the ability to sleep through the night. These are not luxuries. They are the early benefits of stability. Once stability exists, strategic thinking becomes possible. A person may notice that their insurance is too expensive and take the time to shop rates. They may review subscriptions, they may renegotiate a phone plan, they may compare bank fees, they may stop paying for things they do not value. These optimizations may save $50 a month or $100 a month. That may not sound enormous, but in a system, repeated savings become new fuel. They accelerate the next goal. This is how wealth building often begins. Not with a sudden giant breakthrough, but with a reduction in leaks. And once the leaks are reduced, surplus appears. Surplus can be directed. Directed surplus can compound. Compounding requires surplus. That is why the first 10,000 matters. It is not the finish line. It is the creation of the surplus mindset. The next important change is how you evaluate opportunity. When you have no savings, even small opportunities can feel too expensive. A $50 networking event feels risky. A $200 course feels impossible. A certification exam feels out of reach. A move to a better market feels unthinkable. But when you have $10,000, these same opportunities can be evaluated rationally. You can ask, what is the expected return? Will this increase my earning power? Will this reduce a cost? Will this open a better network? Will this improve my long-term position? You are not forced to reject opportunity because of immediate cash panic. You can make a decision based on probabilities. This is a major step in the evolution of a financial life. Poor financial conditions often keep people from investing in themselves. Then, because they cannot invest in themselves, their earning power stagnates. Because their earning power stagnates, they remain fragile. The cycle repeats. A savings buffer can interrupt that cycle. It allows self-investment, and for many people, the highest return investment is not a stock. It is an improvement in their own earning ability. But again, this does not mean recklessness. The existence of $10,000 does not mean you should gamble it on a friend's idea, a speculative asset, or an emotional decision. The buffer is there to create stability and intelligent optionality. If you destroy the buffer, you return to fragility. So the principle is balance. Use the buffer to think better. Do not use it as an excuse to become careless. Another important point is that saving the first $10,000 changes the way you view the next $10,000 before the first milestone. The number feels impossible. After the first milestone, the next one feels plausible. This is how momentum is built. A person who has never saved may not believe they can save. A person who has saved 10,000 knows they can. That knowledge is a form of capital. Self-trust is capital. When you trust yourself to follow a financial plan, the plan becomes stronger. When you do not trust yourself, every plan is fragile. The first 10,000 builds evidence that you can do what you say you will do. That evidence changes behavior. You start thinking about 20,000, then 50,000. Wealth is often built through sequences. Small, repeatable behaviors produce larger results than dramatic bursts of enthusiasm. That is why I care so much about systems. A system that can be repeated is more valuable than motivation that disappears. Saving $10,000 also teaches you that the goal is not to look rich. The goal is to become less fragile. Many people confuse financial progress with visible consumption. A nicer car, better clothes, more impressive vacations, a more expensive apartment. But those things can be purchased with debt. They can be purchased with income that leaves no surplus. They can create the appearance of wealth while increasing fragility. The first 10,000 is usually invisible. Nobody may know you have it. There may be no external applause. But internally, everything changes. That is a healthy kind of wealth. Quiet wealth, functional wealth, a base. In a world where people are often rewarded socially for looking successful, building invisible stability requires maturity. You have to care more about reality than appearance. That mindset separates people who accumulate wealth from people who display income. The next part is practical. How do you get there if you are starting from little or nothing? You do not need to save it all at once. You need to create a durable process. Start with an amount so small that you can maintain it. It may be $25 a month, it may be $50, it may be $100. The first purpose is not speed. The first purpose is consistency. Once the habit exists, increase it. When income rises, direct part of the increase to savings before lifestyle absorbs it. When a windfall arrives, save a portion immediately. When an expense is cut, redirect the difference. When you avoid a purchase, move some of that money to the account rather than letting it disappear elsewhere. Make the system automatic if possible. Money that moves before you see it is easier to keep. Put the savings in a separate account, not because separation creates wealth, but because it reduces temptation and clarifies purpose. This money is not for everyday spending. It is not for lifestyle upgrades. It is the foundation. If you must use it for a true emergency, use it. That is why it exists. Then rebuild it. The rebuilding is part of the system. The mistake is not using the emergency fund for an emergency. The mistake is using it for non-emergencies or failing to restore it after it has done its job. You must also be honest about spending. Many households have more flexibility than they think, but the flexibility is hidden inside convenience, subscriptions, food delivery, small purchases, upgrades, and habits that feel normal because everyone else is doing them. The goal is not to live miserably. The goal is to decide deliberately. If a purchase genuinely improves your life and fits your plan, fine. But if money is leaking through habits you barely notice, that is a problem. Awareness converts leaks into savings, and savings converts fear into options. This is the sequence. Do not underestimate small amounts. If you save $100 a month, you are building proof. If you save $200 a month, the timeline shortens. If you cut a recurring expense and direct it automatically into savings, the system improves without constant thought. If you add side income and save all of it, the process accelerates. The number 10,000 may be the milestone, but the real asset is the person you become on the way there. That is the part most people miss. The person who saves the first 10,000 becomes more aware, more patient, more deliberate, and more capable of delaying gratification. Those traits are worth far more than $10,000 because those traits can build the next 10,000 and the next one, and eventually much more. Financial independence is not created by money alone. It is created by the behaviors that money reflects. A person with a strong savings identity and modest income can often become wealthier over time than a person with high income and no discipline, because the first person has a machine that retains capital. The second person has a machine that consumes it. Now, I want to be clear, $10,000 is not enough for every person in every situation. If your monthly expenses are very high, or your job is unstable, or your family responsibilities are large, you may need more. If you live in an expensive city, $10,000 may not cover many months. If you have health issues, dependents, or irregular income, the buffer should probably be larger. But $10,000 is a psychologically and practically important first milestone because it is large enough to cover many ordinary shocks and visible enough to change identity. It is the first moment when many people feel, I am not one accident away from disaster. That feeling changes a life. It does not solve all problems, but it changes the way problems are experienced. When you are fragile, problems become threats. When you have some resilience, problems become manageable. That difference compounds. There is another hidden truth here. The person who saves $10,000 often begins to attract better opportunities, not because the world knows the account balance, but because the person behaves differently. They show up with more confidence. They are less scattered. They are less desperate. They can prepare for interviews. They can take time to choose. They can negotiate. They can invest in skills. They can think about 5 years, not just Friday. Long-term thinking is easier when short-term survival is not constantly threatened. That is why financial buffers create better decisions, and better decisions create better financial outcomes. This is a reflexive loop. Fragility creates bad decisions, and bad decisions create more fragility. Resilience creates better decisions, and better decisions create more resilience. The first $10,000 can be the point where the loop begins to reverse. That is why it matters. So when I look at the question of how everything changes after saving $10,000, I do not see a number. I see a change in system state before the milestone. The person is often liquidity constrained, psychologically stressed, behaviorally reactive, and opportunity poor. After the milestone, the person is not rich but has liquidity, lower stress, better behavior, and more opportunity. That is a major shift in markets. Small changes in conditions can produce large changes in outcomes. The same is true. A small buffer can change the decision tree, and a changed decision tree can change the life path. If you are starting with little, do not let the size of the goal discourage you. Start small, build the habit, protect the buffer, let the identity form. When you reach the first 1,000, respect it. When you reach 5,000, notice how differently you feel. When you reach 10,000, understand what has really happened. You have not merely accumulated cash. You have reduced fragility. You have increased optionality. You have created a foundation for higher quality decisions. You have proven to yourself that you can retain capital. And that proof is the beginning of financial strength. The first $10,000 is not the end of the journey. It is the first real platform. From that platform, you can build investments. You can build skills. You can build income. You can build a business. You can build a better life. But without the platform, every next step is more dangerous. So do not dismiss the milestone because it is not glamorous. The most important parts of a financial structure are often invisible. The foundation is not the part people admire, but without it, the building fails. Build the foundation, protect it. Let it change how you think. Then, when life delivers the next shock, you will not be lying awake at 3 a.m, helplessly rehearsing disaster. You will be able to say, this is a problem, but it is not the end of the world. That is a form of wealth. And for many people, it begins with the first $10,000.